welcome back everyone. So this is the iMac G5 that we talked about a couple videos ago, back when I was still doing my my automotive series. Somewhere in there I've got a video of this machine. In that video I believe we just fired it up and talked about just how awesome of a survivor this thing really is. So this machine belonged to my former boss. Actually, the one who hired me. That was about 3 directors ago. And he bought this one brand new back in 2004 when this model was released. And it's the 17-inch. I forget what it has for a processor, but we'll take a look at the specs in a minute anyway. As of right now, it's in its out-of-box state. He did no upgrades to it whatsoever. This machine was covered under the repair extension that Apple had released due to a high failure rate of logic boards. As it turns out, Apple was hit hard by capacitor gate. And if you don't know what capacitor gate is, look it up. It's quite interesting. But anyway, Apple had a whole series of machines that were affected, and this is one of them. And when I was hired at my current job, my boss brought this machine in shortly after because he wanted me to look at it. It was acting strange and it wouldn't stay on. It was doing some stuff. And I popped the back cover off, and sure enough, boom, every capacitor was leaking. You know, and a machine that was just something like, I think it was like 2 years old at the time. I'm like, that's not normal. So I looked into it, and sure enough, I was actually in the training process for getting my Apple certifications. And sure enough, this machine was covered by that repair extension. So I told them, bring it over to the Apple store. They'll take care of you. I can't do it. I'm not authorized yet. So anyway, so he put the machine, basically stored it as, I don't know, I don't even know if he used it after that. He got it fixed because he could, and that was it. I think he was planning on throwing it away, honestly. But he kept it, and that's why it's in such good condition. He took really good care of this machine. So anyway, today, and we're going to be doing some upgrades, some much needed upgrades. Why? Because we can. Not because we're going to be using this for anything at all, because we won't. I just want to do something with it, and leaving it stuck is not an option. So what are we doing today, Bob? Well, today we're going to be installing some memory. Currently it has 1 gigabyte of RAM. It has 2 512s. And we're going to bump that up to 2 gigs total. That is the maximum supported quantity of RAM for this machine, and that's what we're putting in. When it was ordered new, it did not get ordered with the optional Airport Extreme card because my boss at the time had no plans of putting any wireless networking in his home. Remember, this was 2004. Ethernet was still very much a thing. We're also going to be replacing the stock 80 gigabyte drive with this 500. Now you might be wondering why am I doing this? Well, simple. This 500 gigabyte drive has been sitting on my parts shelf for, when was this thing made? 2000. There it is, January of 16. I think I bought this drive for another project back in like May of 16, and it's been sitting on my shelf ever since. I ended up putting a solid state disk in that machine that I bought it for because that was like a daily driver. The 500 gig drive just sort of stuck around. I never bothered to send it back, and here it is. So I see no value whatsoever and putting a solid state in this machine. This machine gets used so little. I will probably make this video. We'll get it running, we'll get it upgraded, and it's just gonna sit on the floor. I'm not wasting a perfectly good solid state disk for that. So, but oh hey, hi Tommy. Of course, the cat's gonna find a basket of rags. That's just what they do. They are actually genetically bred to find baskets of laundry, rags, anything soft. But the funny thing is, that little gray guy right there, that's Tommy. The funny thing about him is his favorite spot to sleep, you won't believe this, his favorite sleeping spot is right here. on top of the lawnmower. I don't get it. I don't get it. But that's Tommy. I don't need this. Put that away. Okay. So let's get this baby open. Alright, so let's do this. Now, what I love about the G5 is opening it up. You've got a couple of captive screws. They're not even really screwing the case together. What they do is they thread in, and there's the end of the screw is shaped like a pin, and it acts as a locking pin. But it's not really a screw that you take out and remove. You just when you feel resistance on the screwdriver, and you're backing it out, you stop. You go any further, and the back just lifts right off. Swings right out. And then set it aside. Now this is how the Intel iMac should have been built, but sadly it was not. And I believe there's a VESA mount that can go on the back of these machines as well. So once again, let's take a look at the layout of this machine. You've got your power supply on the bottom. It's completely different from the Intel. On the Intel, you've got the power supply up here. The optical drive is over here in this region. Your processor heat sink somewhere over here below the power supply. Hard drive is going to be in the middle. And it's also reversed. So to get the Intel version apart, you've got to unlock the back cover with a credit card. I know, right? Ironic, right? Unlock it with a credit card through two latches that are mounted up in this region on the front. So you're putting the card through the back. You're trying to get the face off the machine. It's a little different, but I like this better. This is a way better design. Much more. It looks very well thought out. You can tell that Apple put a lot of thought into the layout of this machine, but it was ultimately cheaper to build the Intel model the other way around. I can't scrap this machine. I just can't do it. So let's start off with the easiest thing first. We're going to pop the RAM out. Now, okay, it looks like these were installed probably by me or my predecessor. These got two 512. These are yeah. This one, yeah, none of these are genuine Apple. All right, pop this RAM out. Now, I didn't go out looking for the best memory I could find. This is, I paid very little for this RAM. I think the RAM cost me $10 for two 1 gig DIMMs, and they're a matching set. I mean, they're not mix matched. Probably could have got them cheaper, but I had a budget in mind, and I stuck to that budget and then some, or well under the budget I had in mind for this. I'm really doing this upgrade for the fun of it. It's not needed, but I'm doing it because I can. I mean, it's fun. I like this stuff. I like to curate, as I tell people, I find the best examples of the machines I like to collect, and I give them a full service, I give them a good once-over, and if I can find an opportunity for an upgrade that doesn't ruin the aesthetic or the period correctness of the machine, then I'll do it. In this case, we're not doing anything that would alter the machine beyond the way it was built. I'm only replacing the drive because I've got a bigger one that I can put in. I don't need to put a new drive. The drive that's in here is actually in perfect condition. But I guarantee you it's a Hitachi, and I have a vendetta against those. So when you order these machines without a wire, an airport card, the antenna slides into this little hole here to protect it, and then this gets slid in. Get the orientation right. I think it's actually goes in this way. Let's see. Yep, that'd be it. And then we pop the antenna line right there, and it gets plugged in so. Get it in all the way. Tuck and roll. And look at that, it was that easy to put an airport card in this machine. The OS still the OS has the drivers built right in, so we should have no issues there. As for the hard drive, I've already gone ahead and cloned the onboard built-in drive to this. So we should be able to just pop the drive out. Now, how do you take the drive out of a G5? I don't know. I've never done it. And I don't have the service manual either. But I see one screw going into this plate here. And I'm wondering if it pulls, if I have to take, I imagine this cover has to come off. So we're going to take those two screws out. Put them aside. Yeah, I imagine this plate has to be removed. I think I'm right, yep. Okay, it's hooked in with cables rather than slid into a connector. Take a black stick here and I'm going to work these off just like that. Okay. And the drive carrier is held in by 3 screws. What I'm going to do with this machine realistically is I'm going to be placing, or I'm installing any software that I've got in my collection that'll run on it. It's all going on this machine. And I'm going to set it up. I'm actually in the process of, I'm getting rid of some equipment. I'm trying to do this through Facebook, through Craigslist, and I'm not having a lot of luck. But this machine will be staying as one of my last PowerPC Macs. It's in such good condition that I think it's a good candidate for that. We'll disconnect the thermal sensor here. And there's the drive. This is the original Apple. Oh, it's a Seagate Barracuda. Not bad. Interestingly, the thermal sensor is mounted to the drive carrier. In later models, in the Intel, for example, the hard drive is held in by 2 pins that go in the bottom. And on the other side, there's a plastic clip. It straps to the drive and it clips into the metal frame of the machine. And what I'm finding with those plastic clips, as the machine gets older, they tend to crack and the rubber grommets tend to swell. What's happening is the rubber grommets are leaching chemicals into the plastic and causing it to crack and weaken at the mounting points. It's really bad news. So if you find an Intel iMac of this design, you're waging an uphill battle trying to salvage it, unfortunately. And the 100% failure rate on the LCD displays is only the tip of the iceberg with those things. I've had very bad luck with them over the years. So I'm going to be popping these. These are Torx screws. I'm going to pop those out. Yeah, I know I've copied OSs that way before. What I did is I basically cloned it with disk utility, and apparently that's not a good idea. And I just realized that I have a DVD of 10.5. But this machine doesn't have an onboard DVD, does it? I don't think so. Let's see. This doesn't sound good. Oh, it doesn't like it. Well, Well, after checking the cables, everything's snug as a bug in a rug, and guess what? Yeah. You guessed it. Nothing. Okay, so it's now a day later. We're going to try this drive here. This is a 1 terabyte I forgot I had. This has been sitting in a machine that I've been using as a footrest for the past 2 years under my desk. That particular machine once served as my media server, and this was my storage drive. This drive doesn't have a lot of hours on it. It was put in... Jeez. I don't even remember when I bought it, but I know it was fairly new when I had put it in. Actually, no, you know something. This was the storage drive that was in the Dell Optiplex at one point, and I only had it in service for like, I don't know, a month or two, and then I realized that it was a little bit on the small side, so I bought a 4 terabyte storage drive. And I say that because I want to make it clear that it was being used in conjunction with an SSD. But I think it could be a fun little drive for the for this poor little aging Mac that we've got here. So if this doesn't work, I'm just going to put the original IBM drive back in, and we're just going to leave well enough alone. So let's take a quick look at the how the airflow in this machine works. So you've got intake ducts all along the bottom here, and I believe in this compartment is a blower for the CPU, and it pulls air, as far as I can tell, through the sides here, up inside there, and that isolates the CPU cooling air from the rest of the machine. So it sucks it in from the bottom and blows it out the back through this port right here, which then channels that air up and out the back on this side of the cooling channel. The rest of the machine is served by these 2 cooling fans, and they create a vacuum from the case, which draws in air from the strategically placed vents on the bottom for the power supply and the general system area. Those fans exhaust into this port right here, which connects directly to this exhaust port over here, and you can see how clean this thing is. It's amazing. This one here is dedicated to the hard disk space. This one is for the main system cabinet proper. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. A lot of use of this RF shielding foam. This is a metallic. It's actually foam. It has a metallic layer woven into it, and yeah, it's very interesting. I just love the engineering. It is so, you can tell the same team that designed the Xserve had something to do with this. With this cover installed, you can see how they've basically ducted it to have a bias for the air coming from this direction here. So they want it channeling air over the back side of the hard drive, coming in through these perforations over here. And you can see that in this case, yeah, that's pretty much what they're aiming for. Now the air, the makeup air for these vents is going to come through the shell down this side and possibly around this intake area over here. There's your Wi-Fi antenna. There's one of them. I think there's 2 in this one. Nope, only one. There's only one Wi-Fi antenna. Just a beautiful machine. So beautiful. All right, and behold, it has booted up, and I was able to get into disk utility, and the drive is physically present. Now, there is something that we need to know before we go and try to install an OS. We need to repartition this drive as a Mac OS Extended, going into the options, and we want to check Apple Partition Map. This is a PowerPC machine. This is not an Intel machine. It is not a DOS machine. So Apple Partition Map is what we want to use. We're going to hit OK and hit Apply. We'll give it a name, Macintosh HD. There we go. And we're going to hit Apply. And hopefully things work for us. It is formatting. Things are looking up. I don't know what the maximum partition size is, but let me look it up because I don't know. After much digging, I found that 2.2 gigabytes, terabytes, sorry, is the maximum file size, partition size for a Apple file. Whatchamajigger. All right, so we're good. We're ready to go. There's our drive. Bada boom, bada bing. To use a tired cliche, let's select all the things. We're going to do. We don't need to do an erase install because we've done basically all of that. It seems like a waste of a terabyte drive, but then again, you know, why not put all the printer drivers on? I got plenty of space. A full install of 10.5.4 is 11.9 gigs, and we're going to install all of those things and then some. What a waste of a drive. I could have just left the 80 gig drive in there and that would have been fine. I'm going to let the DVD checker run. I want to make sure it actually is a good disk. So we're going to let that go. I have another one if this one doesn't work, so I'm not too concerned. But we're gonna do it up, man. We're gonna put a 1 terabyte drive because we can, because I have one on hand, and we're going to put in 2 gigabytes of RAM, and of course we've got the wireless card, which is detected. You can see there's a wireless radio antenna thing is up here, and if I click on it, it actually works. It shows all the local networks in my area, and we're good. We're gonna let this baby fly and do its thing. And we're done. So I did a little bit of work off camera. Nothing that I haven't shown in other videos before. But I did polish the Mac's polycarbonate case with a Meguiar's plastic polish. I've also gone ahead and taken the entire keyboard apart. And I cleaned the key bed and the keys as one unit while separating the electronics. In a bath of hot soapy water, and I agitated it with a paintbrush. Got these nice and pearly white looking keys to look pearly white again. If I really wanted to go any further with it, I would have taken the key deck itself, removed all the keys to prevent any damage to them. And what you can do is you can use the retrobrite method, whichever method you prefer, and you can retrobrite the key deck or the bed. That would make it look even better. That would make it look brand new again. The one problem with this style keyboard is that the plastic scratches very easily, and more often than not, in fact, I haven't seen one that's been used that didn't look like this in the bottom. Unfortunately, the pads they're placed in the worst location. They're here, 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 and here. And what occasionally happens is as these get old, they begin to sag in the middle, and the bottom middle of the keyboard will rub against the desk. If I had designed this, I would have put a pad here, 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 and hidden the screws under the pads, so the screws don't scratch your desk. That has happened to me. He says screws aren't flush, so they end up scratching your desk. This is just a classic example of Apple's form over function design. This is one of the most egregious examples because it's such a stupid problem. They could have easily resolved it by using thicker pads and more pads. Here, 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 and then 1, 2, 3. So I would have had a total of 8 pads. They did it with 4. It's a combination of cost cutting, perhaps, but it's just a shame. It's such a beautiful keyboard, but because of Apple's stupidity, I have more of these keyboards. I'm going to try to find one that's in better shape. I might actually have one. If not, I might take I have a buffing wheel. I might try to buff the scratches out. But it cleaned up very nicely. This turned out to be not the original. This keyboard was made in 2007. The Mac was made in 2004. So this is a replacement keyboard that I believe the original owner purchased separately. The mouse is not original either. This came from another machine, but this is exactly what would have come with this brand new. This is the last version of Apple's single button mouse ever. And after this was discontinued for the Intel when they switched over to Intel processors, they started shipping their machines with a what they call the Magic Mouse or Mighty Mouse. And the Mighty Mouse looks just like, it's actually identical, same molds, I believe, same exact shape. The only difference is the top is opaque, and there are sensors on either side. Like, it can tell what side you're clicking on without there being a physical button. And it's actually quite a nice mouse, but the scrolling button, or the scrolling ball, tends to get stuck. I have one of them around here somewhere, but I can't seem to find it. But this is what would have come with the original iMac G5. And let's take a look. So I cleaned and polished the casing as best I could. And we're going to fire it up. I went ahead and installed. Yeah, buttons over here on these. I installed all the software that I had that'll run on it. And I don't have a front row remote here, but I have one at work somewhere that I'll bring over here. You can actually use the front row features, which front row was something that Apple had tried prior to the release of the Apple TV. And what they wanted to do was bring basic media functionality to the iMac. So they had this little credit card sized remote that allowed you to manipulate and control iTunes from a reasonable distance. So you could use it in your bedroom or, you know, in a studio apartment, and you could use it as a media center. And you could watch movies with it, control the movies with the front row remote. They discontinued the front row remote. Well, they discontinued front row entirely. I think it was in Mac OS 10.6 or 10.7. I think it was 10.6 when they completely dropped front row entirely. But they still sold a version of that remote up until a few years ago that would allow you to control volume and other media functions. So this Mac I've loaded with a few staples that I have kicking around. We've got, for example, Microsoft Word 2004 for Mac. And how's my focus on that? Yeah, we're looking good. Okay. This machine is quite slow, I'm finding. It's slower than I thought it would be. But then again, it is a G5. And it is a single-core G5. This is not a multi-core machine. The bottleneck isn't necessarily the hard drive, although it is a bottleneck, but it's not the bottleneck here. I think in this case we're looking at a very slow front-side bus and a slow processor. A very taxed processor. This machine shipped from the factory with Mac OS 10.3.9, I believe. I think it was 10.3.9. And we're running 10.5.8. Little fun fact, with 10.5, if you have a 10.5.4 installer, you can run the updater and it will still phone home to Apple servers and it will still download all the latest updates that Apple released for 10.5. So that brings us up to from 10.5.4 to 10.5.8, which is pretty cool. I installed Creative Suite 3 on here. I actually have a copy of it, a legitimate copy of CS3 that I bought years ago. Paid a lot of money for. And it still installs. Now, CS3 you cannot register, but it does accept the license code, and it did install. That includes Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and Flash. And I think there's also Premiere on here as well. Dreamweaver, Acrobat 8 Pro, Flash, Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop. I thought Premiere was on here, but apparently not. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a copy of iLife, the iLife suite, which would include GarageBand and a few other GarageBand, iMovie, and what's that third one? iDVD. Yeah, I don't have that here. I have a version that'll run on an Intel Mac, but not for the PowerPC Mac. I also downloaded a fresh copy of ADT Pro 203, which will allow me to continue using this machine as a bridge machine between the modern world and the Apple II. So I can download Apple II ROMs and experiment with those. I'll be able to boot the Apple IIc or the 2GS off of this machine. Right now, the only Apple II that's currently up and running in the house is the Apple IIc. And the 2GS is currently boxed up, so it didn't actually open, did it? No, it didn't. I'll have to play with that one. Of course, I installed the Sims Complete, which of course requires a disk. There's a modification you can do to make it not require a disk, but I installed the Sims Complete naturally. I use that game a lot. I love it. And I've got 10.4 Fox G5, which is the newest version for the G5 processor. This was a bit of a disappointment. We're actually hitting the limits of the G5 processor trying to run 10.4 Fox. And it's very painfully slow. Just absolutely, almost uselessly slow. I tried going to YouTube and I wasn't able to stream one of my own videos really at all. I mean, it would play in chunks and it was just not playable. Facebook works, but it's again more painfully slow than you can ever imagine. I was able to download a few things, a few items I needed for this machine from their respective sites, no problem. But when you start getting into interactive media, or let's see, let me try another. What site would I? Let's try. Let's go to Yahoo and see how that works. A site that I haven't been to in years. Nobody really uses Yahoo anymore, do they? So this loads just fine. But when you start getting into playable content, it's very, very, very painful. Let me go to let's see. CNN.com is a very bloated site. A lot of media, a lot of ads. Let's see what that does for us. You can hear the cooling fans are ramping up. It's working hard. Yeah, look at that. That's pretty bad. Considering a let's see if I can see my yeah, that's not bad. Okay. Yeah, this is very slow, but it did load the site. It loaded the whole site, and that is surprising. But as soon as I go to open up one of these articles, there's going to be more content, more ads that are going to want to play in the background, and it's just going to choke it down. But one thing you don't get with 10.4 Fox is a bunch of JavaScript errors and all of these, you know, X's and images that won't load and crap. So that's promising. That's very promising. I know that when I tried web browsing on my Windows 98, which is actually running Windows 2000 PC, I went to a couple of different sites, and all I really got were a bunch of red X's where images wouldn't load. and a whole host of pop-ups, pop-up warning error messages. But it loads to a very basic level. Yeah, right now it's just really struggling. No amount of solid-state technology is going to solve that. And that's why I didn't want to this is why I couldn't justify putting an SSD in this machine. This is not a machine I'm going to put somewhere in the house and use to browse the internet. This is a machine that's going to probably sit down here, and I'm going to come down here when I'm bored and play The Sims. That's all I'm going to use it for. And just to preserve it for what it is. You know, this was the last PowerPC machine Apple ever designed. This was probably one of the best of all the iMacs ever built. This is probably one of the best built ones in terms of material usage. One of the things you don't see with this iMac is the typical deterioration that comes with the original iMac. The iMac G3 that's just to the left of me, I could never ship it because one slight bump and the plastics holding it together will actually crumble. You know, a machine like this, you can ship it to, around the world and back, and it will survive. So it's very well built. It's also very precisely built internally. It's easy to work on. One of the easiest Macs I have ever worked on. I've been an Apple tech since 2006. This is the easiest one I have ever worked on. Any Apple product made from the early 2000s until now. So Apple really did a great job with this machine. I just wish they hadn't changed it for the Intel switchover. Another thing about this machine is it was one of the last Apple products to not extensively use Torx screw heads internally. All of the modern Macs, well, any Mac made after 07, they switched to Torx head, and then they started messing with tri-wing screws, pentalobe screws, and quadruple zero Phillips head screws. This machine, you can service this Mac with common tools that might be in your rusty toolbox, and that's what makes this a very well built, well designed, easy to service machine. Honestly, I actually am falling in love with this Mac because it's just, as old as it is, with a few minor upgrades, it performs pretty well outside of the internet. The screen is bright. It's on its maximum brightness right now, I think. Let me see how that... Yeah. 1440 by 900 display. That's pretty decent for 2005 or 4 when it was made. Yeah, it's at full brightness right now. But it's just a very nice machine for what it is, and I only wish Apple had continued in this direction. Unfortunately, Apple took even before Steve Jobs passed away, Apple took a hard left, and they've gone into the territory of machines that are practically unserviceable and extremely difficult to service even if you have the right tools and jigs. I know I just had to spend over $1,000 in custom Apple tools for work. I mean, I didn't spend it, my employer did, so that I can service the newer models of machines. Now, the next generation of laptops that will be coming out after these, I'll need more tools. This, you could, again, rusty screwdriver from your toolbox under your sink, and you can get in here, you can replace the hard drive, you can replace the RAM, you can do a whole motherboard swap. It's the last of its time, really. Well, I want to thank you all for supporting this channel and watching this video, and hopefully I get good feedback from this one. Thank you very much.